Hello, everybody. This is Weaver of Fate. We're going to be judging this debate. The majority of people should be vegan or vegetarian. So, here's how this is going to happen. To make it the most fair, I have this template written out. I don't really like writing a bunch. I prefer just speaking, which is why I'm doing this in video format. So this is basically how this is orientated. I have the topic up here. Then we have the description. So this lets me know important things, that are listed in the debate rules. So for instance, the BOP is shared, which means that we're going to have very few, if any, key arguments. Because normally, a specific side has the BOP, depending on who's, contrasting the norm, right? Pro thinks the majority of people should be vegan or vegetarian, and Con thinks the majority of people should not be vegan or vegetarian. All right. Also, let's look at our definitions. Vegan, a person who does not eat any food derived from animals or typically does not use other animal products. Simple enough. A vegetarian, a person who does not eat meat and sometimes other animal products, especially for moral, religious, or health reasons. All right. So let's state my bias. In other words, what is my preconceived notion going into this debate? I am heavily con. I think that people should not largely be vegan or vegetarian. I don't think there's a moral basis for it. I think that it's healthier for people to eat meats. But let's go ahead and see if this person manages to enlighten me to my misconceptions, or more accurately, preconceptions. Now, of course, it's not going to skew how I judge the debates, one way or the other, but it just allows you to see like where my initial headspace is at with the topic. I'm only going to judge it on the arguments, which is why I have the breakdown right here, and I'm going to read it and react to it live and write down everything so that you can see it. So, basically, I'm going to write, like, let's just go ahead and say he makes an argument about meat being healthier. This might go down under solid arguments, and then I'll put like tally marks. So a tally mark for pro, a tally mark for con. Basically, whoever has the most tallies at the end, in other words, they're going to volley back with one another. Whoever has the most at the end, wins the argument. That awards them points. The person with the most points wins the argument portion. These are ranked by key arguments, aka they are key to the topic. If you win this argument, you essentially win the debate entirely. Solid arguments. These are normally for points where the BOP is shared. This is, in other words, like, it's a very strong argument. It's not game winning, but it's something to at least heavily consider. This will get you 3 points. And minor arguments, maybe these are arguments about particulars or very niche subject matter that doesn't really have a whole lot to do with the topic, but is somewhat related. You get a point for that. So then down here we have conduct and spelling/grammar. In other words, if I see anything that's a bit snippy on one side or the other, so let me just do this. So I know what's the dividing line. The O's are the dividing line. So if I see, for instance, oh, you're a bitch, well, then you get a tally. Or if I see like intensive grammar mistakes, you get a tally, right? If it's something that I can spot, then it's something that I will write down and I'll explain to you why it's a grammar mistake. Now, if it's more iffy, like it's something that I can see people making a mistake on, I will give it a pass. So I'm not going to be, a grammar Nazi. I won't be a stickler. So let's do the same here. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. All right. And with that, let's get it started. Okay. We are reading the case by Novice 2, who is the affirmative, and his opening statement. Overview. As likely expected, to deliver an argument to the effect that the majority of people should become either vegan or vegetarian, I will analyze various impacts that moving towards vegan and vegetarian diets will have on a society. That's a grammar point. So pro picking up an early grammar mistake. All right. So let's go back to write about right here. Its collective health and the environment. Lastly, we will analyze the impacts of our consumer choices on the sufferings of other beings and conclude that for this set of reasons, the majority of people should go vegan. Point A. Environmental reasons. Altering one's diet towards veganism or vegetarianism yields considerably beneficial results for the environment. As Joseph Poore from the University of Oxford delineates, changing your diet to avoid animal products reduces your emissions for a typical global consumer by 28%, land use by 75%, and water pollution by around 60%. And further, diet change is the single biggest way to reduce your impact on the environment, not just emissions, but other environmental indicators: biodiversity, water use, habitat loss, deforestation, nitrogen and phosphorus pollution. The Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine further documents that these empirics are both confirmed and endorsed by the United Nations. From these points of research, it is evident that if people were to adopt vegan or vegetarian diets, the environment will be greatly improved from its entailed benefit towards resource and ecological conservation. Other large studies, such as analysis and valuation of the health and climate change of the health and climate change co-benefits of dietary change, also informs us that transitioning towards more plant-based diets are in line with standard dietary guidelines that are in line with standard dietary guidelines could reduce global mortality by 6 to 10% and food-related greenhouse gas emissions by 29 to 70% compared with a reference scenario in 2050. Mortality will be expounded upon on B1. According to Oxford, avoiding meat and dairy is the single biggest way to reduce your impact on Earth, with research showing that without meat and dairy consumption, global farmland use could be reduced by more than 75%, an area equivalent to the US, China, European Union, and Australia combined, and still feed the world. The planet will receive a significant benefit if the majority of people took the action to reduce their animal product consumption by adopting a veganism or vegetarian diet. Alright, I would put this definitely under the solid arguments. So let's go ahead and make this the environmental argument. I misspelled environmental. Of course I did. Nice. Yeah, no shit. I can't believe I misplaced the R. It's so stupid. Anyway, let's keep going. Pandemic considerations. Observing the paper, The Animal-Human Interface and Infectious Disease in Industrial Food Animal Production, Rethinking Biosecurity and Biocontamination by J.P. Graham, Ph.D., et al., we find that the impact of animal agriculture towards the development of enhanced bacteria, viruses, diseases, and likelihood for epidemic and pandemic outbreaks is profound. In 2004 indicates that the odds of H5N1 outbreaks and infections were significantly higher in large-scale commercial poultry operations as compared with backyard flocks. These data suggest that successful strategies to prevent or mitigate the emergence of pandemic avian influenza must consider risk factors specific to modern industrialized food animal production. Additionally, studies like the infectious disease trap of animal agriculture demonstrates that intensification of animal agriculture through confinement and industrialization has directly led to the emergence of viruses including Nipah and H5N1 influenza, swine flu, and antibiotic-resistant infectious bacteria including methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus and Escherichia coli, good old E. coli. Dangerous strains of viruses emerge from the prevalence of animal agriculture, and the demand for these products creates the size of the industries we see today. From this, as Hayek concludes in the study, preventing zoonotic diseases require international coordination to reduce the high demand for animal-sourced foods. Now the question is, what is a good, if not the best way to reach this goal? And evidently, a shift to vegan and vegetarian diets will considerably reduce the demand for animal products. Alright, solid argument, I would say. I'd say this is pertinent to the topic. We will call this the pandemic argument. Toll. Just to make it match. Health. Well, shouldn't you have put pandemic considerations under health? It seems a bit weird, but let's continue. Perhaps you wanted to lump it under environmental reasons, but these two kind of overlap, especially considering that you're more so talking about diseases, which definitely impacts health more than it impacts the environment as a whole, like greenhouse gases. So, you could, I guess, argue that diseases and bacteria are part of the environment, but their importance is due to their impacts on, for instance, crops, and our own health and the health of the animals that we're going to raise. So that's a bit weird for your structuring, but it's not a point that it's not gonna be something that I reduce your points for. Health. This is extensive. This is extensive to the point that one of the key measures we can take to reduce large-scale impositions of global suffering from pandemics and animal-borne diseases is reducing our demand for and consumption of meat products. There are several imperative health benefits to veganism or vegetarianism. Some studies reported upon by the BBC, for example, show that people who eat vegan or vegetarian diets have a lower risk of heart disease, but a higher risk of stroke, possibly partially due to a lack of B12. And further, that those who didn't eat meat had 10 fewer cases of heart disease and 3 more strokes per 1,000 people compared to the meat eaters. Apart from vastly being imperative towards the health, wrong. The correct grammar in that state is, apart from being vastly imperative towards the health and wellness of individuals. The reduction in severe medical emergencies likely comes with prospective savings in the medical field. Mayo Clinic also confirms what we would expect of the converse research that okay, let's reread this. That was weird. Mayo Clinic also confirms what we would expect of the converse research shows that what? People who eat red meat are at a higher risk of death from heart disease, stroke, or diabetes. Processed meats also make the risk of death from these diseases go up. All right. So considering that these two overlap quite a bit, I will put this under the minor argument. So we'll make this we'll just name it the health argument. So of course, we'll put a tally for pro, tally for pro, tally for pro so far. Mortality and global level population. Okay, this is going to be under the health argument as well. Analysis and evaluation of the health and climate change co-benefits of dietary change also analyze the number of annual lives that will be saved from switching to different degrees of a plant-based diet, respectively from 1. Moving to fewer animal source foods, 2. Moving to vegetarianism, and 3. Adopting veganism. 1. Moving to diets with fewer animal source foods would have major health benefits. Compared with the reference scenario, we project that the adoption of global dietary guidelines would result in 5.1 million avoided deaths per year, 95% confidence interval, 4.8 to 5.5 million, in 79 million years of life saved, 75 to 83 million. The equivalent figures for vegetarian diet are 7.3 million avoided deaths, 7 to 7.6 million, and 114 million lives saved. 114 million life years saved. Thank you, Jesus Christ. 111 to 118 million, and for the vegan diet, 8.1 million avoided deaths, 7.8 to 8.5 million, and 129 million life years saved. 125 million to 133 million. Peer-reviewed studies within the field of medical sciences support the notion that with an increased degree of moving away from animal products, especially adopting veganism and vegetarianism, will result in 7 to 8.1 million fewer deaths per year. Okay. Marcos Springmann's analysis, as cited above, also evidences. I don't know if that would be the correct grammar, so I'll leave it. That sounds strange. That 45 to 47% of all avoided deaths were from reduced coronary heart disease, and 26% from stroke, 16 to 18% from cancer, and 10 to 12% from type 2 diabetes mellitus. Okay, but isn't that strange? So you're saying that, for instance, this study says that, all avoided deaths. Let me look at this study. Analysis and evaluation of health, climate, and dietary change. Here we use, okay, consequence of changing diets. We also make the first attempt in knowledge to estimate the economic value. Different, okay. Health analysis, okay, associated with changes in dietary. The specific risk factors influence mortality. Food dose, okay, which allows us to compare different scenarios based. Given the availability of consistent, we focus on changes in consumption of red meat, fish, and vegetables, which together accounted for more than half of diet-related deaths, and also the fraction of people overweight and obese, which is with chronic disease. These 4 diseases, okay, given that dietary and weight-related risk factors are predominantly associated with against the changes in those risk factors for adults. Okay, results. Let's look at the results. Health impacts. For avoided deaths were reduced, 26 from stroke. Okay, this is where you got it from. And major health benefits, okay, would result in avoided deaths. 9 million. Different initiated by a risk factor of avoided deaths. Due to decrease. Okay, 20 to 35% to increase, and 19-30% prevalence of being overweight and obese. Reduced mortality compared with lower red meat consumption. Higher across the non-reference range, 47%, 26% from stroke. Right. Regional breakdown. Okay, occurred. Red meat consumption was a risk factor that had the most positive health effects in East Asia, Western, okay, Latin America. Increasing fish and vegetables was avoided death in least developed regions. Okay, reduced energy intake. All right. So the big issue that I have with this is, your sources contradict. So here it says that red meat is the highest factor that will influence the mortality of people from these diseases that can have preventative measures taken to combat them or to prevent them from showing up. And they include stroke. Now, you try to use that as a way to promote the vegan diet, but then your source right here says that there's an increased risk of stroke in veganism and vegetarianism. So your sources contradict, which means that if you use both for your cases, I can't give one pertinence over the other because you viewed both of them as equivalent to support your case, but they contradict one another, which undermines the credibility of your position. Animal suffering. Studies estimate that 95 is the average number of animals spared each year by one person's vegan diet. This is the demand evaluative impact of a vegan diet. This is not only sparing the lives of animals alone, but the degrees of torturous suffering experienced by them in factory farming systems. It is certainly immoral to cause suffering that is unnecessary or that need not be imposed. It is clear the majority of people do not require animal products, especially with extensive studies showing that vegan and plant-based diets are both healthier, as shown above. Your sources contradicted in some of yours, and significantly cheaper. Yeah, that's true. From this, we derive that we don't need to exploit animals to cause needless suffering. We have healthier and cheaper options that are in culmination better for the environment and society as a whole. And because of this, I think it's clear that the majority of people should be vegans or vegetarians. So the last one we'll put under the solid arguments is, of course, we'll term this the morality argumental. Let's boop right here. Of course, you get tallies because these are all your own arguments. So let's go ahead and see what Rational Madman has to say. Needless suffering turned on its head. Why should all meat eaters that enjoy meat suffer unnecessarily? Why should all farmers, transporters, butchers, fishermen, and whatever else that may have little expertise outside the meat and fish trade be put out of work? Everything in Pro's case ignores the how of the debate topic. I'm here to whack it back on the table like a delicious steak. Meat processing in the UK employs around 97,000 people. In 2009, the U.S. food and beverage manufacturing sector employed 1.7 million people, or just over 1.1% of all U.S. non-farm employment. In thousands of food and beverage manufacturing plants located throughout the country, these employees were engaged in transforming raw agricultural materials into products for intermediate and final consumption. Meat and poultry plants employ the largest percentage of food and beverage manufacturing workers, followed by bakers and beverage plant. USDA.gov. We can say 97,000 isn't much, and 1.1% doesn't matter. Okay, so why does the animal suffering matter that much more that everyone must have absolutely zero meat plus poultry plus fish in their diet? Pro tells us that needless suffering is to blame, but what of the needless poverty that may come from all turning vegetarian? What of the animals? Yes, that's right. What do you think is going to happen to all the farmed animals when the majority of people are vegetarian and vegan overnight? If people read this debate and obeyed Pro's advice, there would be a mass slaughter of the kinds you cannot fathom. Pro is actually supporting anti-natalism on a massive global scale. We can't even find the data on how many farmed animals are involved in the meat trade. Just so you know, even fish are farmed these days, depending. Not only would all these creatures be slaughtered overnight, not only would people be out of work, stockholders turn bankrupt, etc., but what exactly happens instead? Okay? So I will term this the economic argumental. This, of course, goes to Kant, and he also sufficiently addressed the morality argument. So we're even here. Let's see how this develops. The other side of the story when the world goes hippie, vegan / vegetarian. Alright, we save the environment, but how? Do you see anywhere in Pro's entire thesis about how we ensure that the land space, resources, and expertise, about how we ensure for better? Okay, that's a grammar error. In fact, what I would argue is this. Every shred of scientific work being put into the meat and fish alternatives is a waste of science, relatively speaking. We could be curing cancer, AIDS, heck, we could be focusing instead on making tasty meat and fish we could be focusing instead of making tasty meat and fish alternatives on making alternative body organs for transplant. In Pro's outline doesn't specify how many scientists are burning energy day in, day out, using their time, resources, and potential, and throwing it into a fancy alternative meat and fish product. It is sad to even think about. Plant-based meat substitutes taste and chew remarkably similar to real beef. And 13 items listed on the nutritional labels, vitamins, fats, and proteins make them seem essentially equivalent. But a Duke University research team deeper examination of the nutritional content of plant-based meat alternatives using a sophisticated tool of the science known as metabolomics show they're as different as plant and animals. Meat substitute manufacturers have gone to great lengths to make plant-based products as meaty as possible, including adding like hemoglobin, an iron-carrying molecule from soy, and red beet, berries, and carrot extracts to stimulate bloodiness. The texture of near meat is thickened by adding indigestible fibers like methylcellulose, and to bring the plant-based meat alternatives up to the protein levels of meat, they use isolated plant proteins from soy, peas, and other sources. Some meat substitutes also add vitamin B12 and zinc to further replicate meat's nutrition. However, many other components of nutrition do not appear on the label, and that's where the products differ widely from meat, according to the study, which appears this week in Scientific Reports. The fact is that meat works. Fish is excellent for us to consume. All we have to do is refine the techniques and where to fish, farm, and how we use the land and treat the creatures. We'd be able to put all science to actually useful work. Instead, we are focusing on making a nice steak that isn't meat, just so we can feel good that we wasted the same tech that could make artificial organs for transplant on that. I'd put this under minor argument, mainly because we'll call this the waste argumental, because it's not directly correlated with the topic, and overall, right, one could argue, just based off of the topic alone, that, well, if the topic is true, well, then is it truly a waste, right? It begs the question, is the topic addressed or not, right? So it's not directly correlated to the topic. There's a presupposition of the topic in order to make that argument make sense, right? So I would say this is a minor argumental at best, but it's an interesting perspective to claim. I will say that there's many missed opportunities that he could have gone into. He didn't really give a good rebuttal to the health argumental, neither to the pandemic, the environmental or the environmental argumental, which means that at this point in the debate, we can tally it up. We have equal points, so these cancel each other out. 3 points, 4 points. These cancel one another out because we all have 1 and 1. These cancel, so pro is winning the debate currently by 3 points. If we look at spelling and grammar, con is winning that by 2 points. So let's keep going. All right. Overview. Most of round 2 will be focused on rebuttals, but I will make notes on the fact that various lies were made about my case. Con even goes as far as to say that my actions in making an argument for the revolution are actually supporting anti-natalism. I urge the voters to ignore these points as well as various other immaterial or unsubstantiated claims that may be brought to light. My sinuses are killing me right now. Environmental reasons dropped, extend. Yep, pandemic inclusion dropped, extend. Health reasons dropped, extend. Yep, he did. Mortality and global population levels dropped, extend. Animal suffering. This is the only argument I can detect somewhat of a response to. In the previous round, I argued that because evidence suggests that going vegan or vegetarian will reduce the demand for animal products, which will reduce them being bred into existence to endure suffering and torture in animal farms, and because we conjunctively do not need to eat animals, that we should not take actions to cause needless suffering. Khan says process of needless suffering is to blame, but of the endless poverty that can come from us all turning vegetarian. What of the animals? First, pros provided no empirical evidence for some sort of trend statistically or practically significant causal shift from non-economically impoverished conditions to economically impoverished conditions as a result of the majority of people going vegan or vegetarian. He has only vaguely gestured that people may lose their jobs, which does not evidence this. Well, he did provide a source, if I remember correctly. Yeah, right here. I mean, it begs the question that if you shut down the meat industry, well, what's going to happen to the jobs? And of course, they're going to be shut down, so this is a bad argument. I would say this definitely does not contradict his economic point. In my first rebuttal, I will give both an empirical and principal response to this. The first humoring the point after being briefly granted, and the second disproving the notion altogether. Transition evaluation, job losses. Connor states or implies the possibility that people can lose their jobs, and the majority of people shift to the vegetarian or vegan diets. First, I almost struggle to see the relevance of the topic. People lose their jobs all the time as a result of social shifts. That's not an argument. For example, many people who work in the newspaper industry lost their jobs as the prevalence of digital media increased. This does not mean people should continue to read printed newspapers just because there's an outdated industry here. As society finds more efficient and beneficial practices, we move towards them, and the evidence I have presented have shown these diets to be just that. The fact that someone could lose their job if people no longer use a product is not an argument that people should continue to use that given product anymore. The fact that horse-drawn cart makers could lose their jobs is not a good reason that people should not drive cars. This notion is simply irrelevant to whether or not the majority of people should pursue these diets if granted. That's a bad argument, extremely bad, mainly because it doesn't directly address his points. It's essentially saying, well, so what, right? Which, of course, bad argument, right? You could go and say that the people who drove horse-drawn carriages can now work as, cab drivers. You could say that the newspaper writers can now work as, online authors for articles. But you can't really make that direct comparison, or at least you've neglected to make the comparison, so I can't make it for you, right? So unless you show that, for instance, the people who work in the meat industry can work at meat alternative plants, then your argument is weak, and in which case it doesn't refute the economic point. However, I won't grant this in any capacity. Researchers for studies on the prospective impact of plant-based diet shifts, such as here, reported that expect that these job losses will be offset by growth in other sectors. This is what I was looking for, including flour milling, maize processing, and oilseed farming. Great argument. This is how you argue. So it appears that Khan is incorrect about the true net labor impact of this change in consumption. Furthermore, studies such as jobs in a net zero emissions future in Latin America and the Caribbean predict that the plant-based agriculture sector in 2030 will employ a net creation of 19 million jobs, where animal-based agriculture will face a potential loss of 4 million jobs with decarbonization. Boom. Good rebuttal of the economic point. Do you see anywhere in Pro's entire thesis about how we ensure that land space, resources, and expertise is used for the better? This sentence does not appear to be coherent because it contains an error. Entire thesis about how we ensure that the land space, resources, and expertise, yeah, I believe I already counted that. It contains an error. To focus, when Kant says how we ensure that land, space, resource, and expertise for the better, there is a missing regular verb. If what is meant is used for the better, it would be no different from how we operate under any prominent, generally capitalist economic model. People sell and purchase land, build homes, businesses, etc., and the market forces serve as drivers for innovation. Great rebuttal. Meat and fish alternatives. Kant cites some sources about plant-based meat, etc. No part of my case made any reference to plant-based meat, cultured meat, etc., so I'll dismiss this as irrelevant. That's a mistake. One can be vegan with or without wanting to eat fake meat. My argument is that the majority of people should go vegan because it will produce significantly better outcomes for the environment and the planet, produce significantly better health outcomes for people, and reduce needless animal torture. Well, that's not really the argument that he's making. He's making that if we propose the reality that, people were to stop eating meat, they'd want some type of meat alternative. I mean, I know that if veganism was forced on me, I'd either leave the fucking country or I would, eat good meat alternatives. So, of course, there's going to be a high market for it. So science is going to be diverted to that because people like me who eat a lot of meat are going to want these alternatives for our daily lives. So if I can't eat like stuff with hamburger meat in it, well, what can I eat? And does it taste similar to hamburger meat? And why should I, right? So no, it's extremely relevant to the topic because, again, he's focusing on the how. And whatchamacallit, that's an important point. So I won't grant you that as irrelevant. Oops, I accidentally dropped my mic. Sorry for the ear rape. All right. Kant had some sources. Okay. My argument is that the majority of people should. Okay, there we go. Yes, that's other. Yes, that's right. What do you think is going to happen to all the farmed animals when the majority of people are vegetarian or vegan overnight? People read this debate and obeys Pro's advice. There would be a mass slaughter of the kinds you cannot fathom. First of all, nothing in the resolution entails that this transition should take place overnight. Although my argument is that the majority of people should be vegans or vegetarians. This transition could pragmatically and naturally take place gradually over years of time, whereas Kant must argue it should not happen. That's very true. You're not saying that everybody should be vegetarian. You're specifically saying the majority. So, for instance, if for instance, I need to be, carnivorous or omnivorous for my health, or just because I have a very strong preference towards meats, that sucks, right? For all the vegetarians. But, if other people, should be vegetarians, say, for instance, it's better for their health or better for moral reasons, well, then there you go, right? So you make a fair point. Secondly, there are various options for these animals that will gradually be bred less and less into existence with a vanquishing demand. Because of this, there will not be a need to engage in the killing of these animals. Rather, we should eventually be expanding our apparatus of resources towards their conservation. On my view, for example, animal sanctuaries should be constructed for this purpose. When there are fewer of these animals, they'll be able to live more natural lives. I can, like, if Pro is, if Khan, has a good argument, they will address that. Conclusion. With nearly the entirety of my case dropped and the entirety of Khan's case proven to be a collection of straw men and poorly evaluated claims, that's a conduct. The trajectory of this debate is clear at the moment. These dropped points are quite interesting to think are dropped. Let's see round one counterangles again. Needless suffering flipped. Now, not only are the worked in the different direction. Grammar. The worked in the not only are the worked in the direct meat trade all going to be out of work and struggling, let's actually see how many rely on it. All chefs that specialize in meat and fish meals, the restaurant, cafes, etc. that are known for such meals, the entirety of the majority that will convert to suit Pro's will, which will prefer meat and fish, will suffer needlessly. The needless suffering has me wondering, what is a need to suffer? Pro is basing a huge amount of their case upon the premise that needless suffering is wrong, so what is the need basis of the suffering that is right? This is an interesting argument. So let's go ahead and take a look back at here. Let's just reread this to ensure that we have this in our mind. Blah, 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 blah. We'll reduce. Because we definitely do not need to eat animals. Then we have the job argument. No empirical evidence. Okay. This condition, meat and fish. Okay, there we go. Okay, so what is the need basis of the suffering? What need is there to stop all meat and fish trade? If anything, all Pro did was explain why we should perhaps be pescatarian and focus less on factory farmed meat. Nothing in Pro's case explains the need for everyone to suffer through unpleasant vegetarian diets. On average, 86% of people surveyed for the Statista Global Consumer Survey in 39 countries said that their diet contained meat, highlighting that despite the trend around meat substitutes and plant-based products, eating meat remains the norm almost everywhere in the world. It is safe to say that absolutely nobody eating meat would not suffer from giving it up. So what is the need for them to? Why is it okay for all animals that aren't human to eat what they naturally eat, but humans need to be the only animal suffering through an artificially herbivorous diet to appear the likes of Pro? To appear the likes of Pro? I think you meant to appease the likes of Pro. Okay. The entire basis of needless suffering ignores the fact that humans do suffer when giving up their natural diet, and all those involved in the trade will needlessly suffer. What is the land and all the resources going to go? The mass slaughter point is pretty irrefutable. That's simply what most sensible farmers are going to do. Their cows and hens maybe are still useful for milk and eggs, but if enough turn vegan, not just vegetarian, they'll be rendered useless. In fact, this is also a problem with the resolution, since the vegan or aspect is extremely vague. This means all arguments I could make to the cake industry, milk and cheese industry, pastry industry, etc. Basically, this means all arguments I could make. Okay. I think that's barely grammatically correct. Basically, a massive amount of tasty treats we enjoy would become much worse or ridiculously expensive. The problem is every shred of character space and energy I'd spend exploring that, Pro can just reply, hey, they can just be vegetarian instead. That's very true, but you're the one who accepted the debate. If you had issues with it, you should have said anything. You should have said something. Regardless, I would like to know how on earth Pro thinks I didn't address the environmental point. Round one, I say this, all right, we save the environment, but how? Do you see anywhere in Pro's entire thesis about how we ensure the land space, resource expertise for the better? Let me make this clear. The entire land space being used is still going to be used. Do you think that the land space, water, and all of it is going to be used less or used better according to Pro? What guarantee is there of that? All Pro has encouraged is us destroying the entire meat and fish industry in exchange for what exactly? There is no elaboration given at all. I then extended to point out that all complications, and especially scientific resources, going towards the long-term global replacement of meat and fish products is really a waste of science. Grammar error. Okay. Complications, okay. Not only severely and indirectly, but absolutely directly, since the very same tech that makes fake steaks is just a few science steps away from instead having been well-spent effort and resources on making fake organs for transplants. We are currently not wasting too many resources and personnel on such endeavors, thanks to the fact that the majority of the world is not vegan and vegetarian. If the demands... Grammar error. Okay. Let's go this. If the demand was high enough, you mean, so much would be wasted on that to maintain it, and this is the only way for Pro to suggest people won't suffer needlessly while giving up their naturally delicious and wanted meat and fish. I will, for the sheer sake of avoiding unfair votes against me, address what Pro is saying I haven't now. I reiterated that not one iota of proof or guarantee is there that the land will be used in a better way for the environment. This is a moot point, since all farmland and resources could be used worse. Fair. This is a good point to the environmental argument. All Pro used was say, oh, well, it's capitalism. It'll be used in that regard, but it doesn't address how it'll be used effectively. So that's a fair argument. Pandemic considerations. This is an extremely peculiar point. Rather than encourage us to crack down and develop better anti-new virus combat teams, Pro would have us stay on low defense and instead slaughter all farm animals in force. Wait. What is a majority? If only 50.01% of the world is the majority vegetarian, there'd still be a meat trade, which lets there be a pandemic at any time, really. I don't comprehend exactly what Pro means here. Are we to seriously consider free cases of viruses in animals to be the reason to turn the majority vegan or vegetarian? What exactly does Pro want me to retort? Okay, I think that's definitely fair. Said this in round one. Okay, you went over that, okay? However, since Pro ignores that, I'll add more explicit ones. Meat and fish sources of protein. Meat and fish are different food groups, but they have something in common. Both are sources of protein, a nutrient important for muscular health. Ah, finally, somebody brings up protein. The proteins found in meat and fish are of high biological value, meaning they contain all essential amino acids required to support our body functions in the right proportions. Besides proteins, these groups supply varying amounts of other important nutrients such as vitamins and minerals. Meat, nutritional profile and servings. Meat is a source of Group B vitamins and several minerals such as iron and magnesium. Group B vitamins provide energy for our body and brain. Meat iron is high availability iron, meaning that it has a higher rate of absorption and usage than plant based sources of iron for normal body functions. Eating 3 weekly servings of meat, choosing lean cuts, is recommended by the Spanish Society of Community Nutrition. According to the same guidelines, the consumption of red and processed meats should be moderated once or less a week. However, fish, nutritional profile and servings. Fish is a source of vitamin D. I didn't know they were high in vitamin D. And minerals such as phosphorus and iodine. That's true. Fatty fish is, and this is my personal experience. I didn't eat a lot of fish. Didn't get a lot of iodine as a result. Led to thyroid conditions. So that's actually very important in case you didn't know. Fatty fish is rich in polyunsaturated fatty acids, omega-3s, which reduce the bad cholesterol, LDL, by cutting down triglyceride levels and preceding substances which play a major preventative role in cardiovascular diseases. Vitamin D is important for correcting calcium fixation in bones. That is very true. And phosphorus helps to maintain healthy teeth. Fish consumption is particularly important for pregnant and breastfeeding women and during periods of growth such as childhood. Eating 3 to 4 weekly servings of fish is recommended by the Spanish Society of Community Nutrition. Shellfish are high quality protein sources too, low in sodium, calories, and saturated fats. Shellfish also contain polyunsaturated fatty acids, omega-3s, and are excellent sources of vitamin B1, B12, and minerals such as phosphorus, potassium, iron, iodine, fluorine, and zinc. In other words, there are health benefits outweighing and or equally weighing against the drawbacks of excessive meat and fish in the diet. It is a moot point. So, boom. And let's go back to their argument right here. Produce significantly better outcomes for the environment, planet. Produce significantly better outcomes for people. Okay, transition job losses. Really better for the outcomes. Okay, produce. Okay, yeah, so they didn't refute that. Okay, good. Let's continue. In other words, there are health benefits outweighing and are equally weighing against the drawbacks of excessive meat and fish in the diet. It's a moot point. Mortality and global level population dropped extent. What? The world is currently overpopulated. How is this even the issue to base the majority of the world turning vegetarian / vegan on? Yes, for 2 main reasons. First, people are rapidly displacing wildlife species across initiating a mass extinction event. Secondly, degrading ecosystems to provide essential replaceable environmental services that future generations will need to live decent lives. Both these trends are driven in large part by immense unprecedented numbers of human beings. Because there are too many of us to share the earth fairly with other species and with future human generations, Earth is overpopulated. Deforestation in Madagascar, habitat destruction is threatening many of Madagascar's endemic species. It's already driven some of them to extinction. If meat and fish are somehow are argued to lower our lifespan, that actually could be a net good. So we'll call this. Let's just call this the population argument. Would that be a solid point? I'll put this as a minor point because it's building off of, okay, well, what do we do? If I had a category between, like, moderate points, that's probably where I'd put this. So I will just leave it for right now and see if it becomes really contentious. Okay, so let's go ahead and tally right now. Right now it's even on all major points, and the minor arguments has Con winning by 1. Conduct has a win for Con so far. And spelling and grammar has a win for Pro so far. Let's keep going. So how many rounds is this? This is the final round. All right, so this is for all the marbles, people. All the marbles. I want to see some good refutations. Now here's how this is going to work. If whatchamacallit, pro does not gain any points, any tallies, well then, that's that, right? Con automatically wins. I don't need to read further. If they do, I'll read. So let's go ahead and see what pro does. Finally enough, at least there are now some responses to my case. In this round, I will go through my contentions first, my past rebuttals, and new rebuttals. I note that Khan drops nearly every rebuttal I made last round and sadly continues to repeat himself. This round, as another note, when pro lies about my case, because my speeches have a clear structure, I point to section specifically. Not an iota of proof or guarantee is there that the land will be used in a better way for the environment. Pro claims that there is not one iota of proof. It can be discounted by the multiple peer-reviewed studies and articles that report on them. I cited expressly in my round one arguments. I already show that diet change is the single biggest way to reduce your impact on the environment, not just emissions, but other environmental indicators. According to both the United Nations and research from Oxford University, both points were dropped. It is disproven by the study I cited, showing that transitioning towards more plant-based diets are in line with standard dietary guidelines could reduce global mortality by 6 to 10%, and food-related greenhouse gas emissions by 29 to 70% compared with the reference scenario. But he did address that. That's the issue. He addressed the point on the environment by stating, how are you going to ensure that it's going to be used in environmentally friendly ways? So, for instance, if we use the farmland for industry instead, well, that could potentially contribute more to pollution. You haven't proven that, for instance, even if we followed the natural course, let's just say a natural distribution of industry, that it would reduce the carbon footprint. You're saying that individual carbon footprints are, reduced by eating meat, but you're not saying the collective, right? Which is, I think, where he's getting at. So the point remains uncontested. That reduced global mortality. He did attack that by stating that they needed vitamins, but simply by the fact that that you have reiterated your position, I will give you a point. Health argument. Boop. All right. All of which has been cited throughout the debate. Pandemic considerations. This claim was not made, ignored as a strong. Rather than encourage us to crack down and develop new, the pro would have us stay on low defense. The claim was not made, ignored as a straw man. We should both be developing antivirus medication as well as reducing harmful practices, develop resistance to viruses. There's no reason there has to be one or the other. No, his point, and I think what you're missing, is he's saying that science, like the scientists that would be, producing, for instance, antivirals or organ transplants would instead be devoted towards meat alternatives simply due to the fact that there'd be a high demand, right? So that's his argument. That doesn't refute his argument. So let's continue. Are we to seriously consider freak cases of viruses in animals to be the reason to turn the majority vegan or vegetarian? What exactly does pro want me to retort? If you engage with the evidence I presented, these are not freak cases. In addition to the previous study, a 2004 joint consultation with the World Health Organization concluded that the anthropogenic forces such as the agricultural expansion intensification to meat increases demand for animal protein are one of the major drivers of zoonotic disease emergence. Further, animals on factory farms routinely fed vast amounts of antibiotics in order to keep them alive in conditions that would otherwise kill them. Because of this, even the most powerful antibiotics are ineffective against certain bacteria, contributing to the emergence of superbugs, new aggressive antibiotic-resistant pathogens. The growing demand for animal protein resulted in the tripling in the increase of antibiotic resistance. Boom. Great. Winning the pandemic argument, that would be pro. Right there. Okay. So yes, one of the reasons people should go vegan is because of this horrible phenomenon of pathogen resistance documented extensively in the scientific community. The article titled says it perfectly: factory farming conditions, antibiotic resistant pathogens emerging as a result of them pose an existential threat to humans in the form of zoonotic diseases. Why it's the time to produce and consume food more thoughtfully. If only 50.01% of the world is the majority vegetarian, there'd still be a meat trade, in which case, which lets there be a pandemic at any time. Really, Kant's confusion is peculiar here. No one claimed that the meat trade would end. All I'm arguing is that it would reduce the risk of the pandemic and the development of resistant bacteria and viruses. Just because a problem still exists does not mean it can't be attacked or reduced. Just like we may not have a cure for cancer, but we can treat cancer to a greater degree. As I have shown, this is a situation imperative to address. Well, let me look over your sources. One of the major drivers, animals on factory farms. Okay. Growing demand for animal protein resulted in a tripling factory farming condition. Antibiotic resistant pathogens emerging as a result of them pose an existential threat to humans and diseases. Okay. So we already have, the pandemic argument in your favor, so that doesn't really help. We already have it in your favor as well, but I will read it anyway. Once again, we say to round 2, meat substitutes are not relevant to my case. That's going to be your downfall, more than likely. It is very relevant to your case. All my argument is that removing meat consumption from your diet is overwhelmingly more healthy than not, with various studies cited to that effect, but also lies that this was ignored, as my response is clearly included in the rebuttal's transition evaluation. Another clear misrepresentation of my case. Okay, ignored. I think what he's saying when it comes to the ignored was that you ignored his plant-based. You just said it was irrelevant, right? Which is the equivalent of a drop if the voter does consider it relevant. So just to make sure, let's see if there's anything else. Ignores the how of the debate topic. Ignores the fact. Yep, okay. Meat and fish. Okay, there we go. Pro just cites a source that shows how meat and fish have protein. I'm not sure how relevant this is. No one argued that meat is deficient of any sort of nutritional value or that meat has no protein. Okay, good. We have that. That meat has no protein. Just that people can be overwhelmingly more healthy by not eating meat, by pursuing a plant-based diet. I cited multiple studies for this claim, including the points of research, and Khan engaged with none of them. In other words, there are health benefits outweighing or equally weighing against the drawbacks of excessive meat and fish in the diet. It's a moot point. Khan's error here shows clear confusion. Just because X has a benefit and Y has a benefit, does that mean that X and Y have equal benefits or equal in capacity? For example, eating a chocolate cake for dinner may have some minor niche benefits, and eating a salad meal will also have benefits, but it does not follow that the foods are equally as healthy. And that is clear from the evidence I have shown that veganism and or vegetarian diets come with the overall best health outcomes, and that the more meat is taken out of your diet, the healthier you will be. I extend my sources. Environmental pandemic, morality, economic. Okay. Good. Morality and global consumption levels. Khan misunderstands my point here. My contention has nothing to do with overpopulation as an issue. It simply shows that because vegan and vegetarian diets make people live longer and improve their quality of life, they are thus healthier diets. Well, I believe that that he's trying to state that even it's we can't make okay, let me phrase this in the correct way. It's an even if argument. So it goes like, well, the meat is just as healthy as not eating meat or healthier, but even if it wasn't, the world is overpopulated, right? So he's essentially trying to cover his base with, if you refute one of those points, you also have to refute the other because he has a failsafe. Now, the correct response is to do the same. So hopefully, let's see you do that. Make people live longer, improve their quality of life. Okay, it simply shows a vegan makes people live longer, improve their quality of life, and thus makes healthier diets. What, the world's currently overpopulated? How's this even an issue to base the majority of the world turning vegetarian or vegan on? If meat and fish somehow are argued to be to lower our lifespan, which could actually be a net good. As noted, the issue of overpopulation is not what I'm arguing concerning. But regardless, this is perhaps Khan's weakest point in the debate. Globally poor countries are developing and gaining a better quality of life. This is the basis of the demographic transition model. Just because the population increases does not mean that people should live worse lives and be unhealthy. Because we progress with technology, as we become more efficient, we develop new ways to manage our resources. Secondly, transitioning to veganism and vegetarianism is one of the best ways to manage overpopulation because all the land used for animal agriculture can be occupied by humans and be more sustainable and efficiently used to manage the issue. In fact, the study, Options for Keeping the Food System Within Environmental Limits, found that switching to a plant-based diet, having food waste, and improving existing farm practices can feed the projected world population of 10 billion by 2050, so Khan's argument can just be turned on him. Feed the projected... options for keeping them within... Okay. Khan also cites that species displacement as an issue. Unfortunately for him, studies show that a truly staggering 60% loss of global biodiversity can be blamed squarely on our meat-based diets. So if Khan's concerns veganism are the true solution, then the argument is self-refuting once again. Okay, so since this was a decent contention in the debate, I'll put this population argument under minor, and I will put that definitely for con. And for future reference, the point is just to point out that, either way he puts it, it's a moot point. That makes it to where you square the health and the population argument. So in other words, well, he's arguing an even if argument. So, even if I prove that vegetarianism is healthier and will make people's lives, better, then he wins on the overpopulation argument because people will live longer and thus more people will be alive to consume more food. But if he proves that meat is is healthier, then it creates the other part of the even if, which means that, oh well, meat's healthier, but vegetarianism will help reduce the global population, thus it is like a net good, right? So if you went that way, you would cover both of your bases. But because you didn't go that way and instead you tried to attack his health argument, he wins that. And I put it under minor because I don't want any accusation of bias. I already stated my bias. So I think that it's very clear that if I should probably, for future debates, put a moderate category, which is definitely what I'll look into doing. But whatchamacallit, he wins that argument for sure. Transition, evaluation, job losses, dropped, extended. Meat and fish, he did not drop that. Dropped, extended. Let me look at that. Pandemic, tire space being used. What is it? Pastry, cake industry. Regardless, I know I'd like to know this. I didn't address the environmental point. Chefs that specialize in meat and fish. Restaurants. Okay, suffer needlessly. Yeah, but it's not a strong enough rebuttal to where I can put it in his favor, so let's go ahead and put the economic argument solely in your corner. Let's see what he has to do. Okay. Mass slaughter of animals, once again, there is no entitlement that animals have to be slaughtered as mentioned in round 1, especially because animals will these animals. Grammar error. That will gradually be bred less and less into existence, with a vanquishing demand to a point where they can be conservated. But even if this were to happen, is conservated a word? I've never heard that word. Conservated. Conservated. Nope, not a word. Grammar. Okay, so we have even so far, so I can't automatically award a point yet. Okay. If that were to happen, it would be better and continue breeding billions of animals. Okay, here, wait. It would gradually be bred less, okay? Can be conservated. But even if this were to happen, it would be far better than the continued torture, the continued future of breeding billions of animals into existence to experience torturous lives. So even if this happened, it would not invalidate any reason for the majority of people to go vegan, as it would save many animals and many future animals from extreme suffering. 95 is the average number of animals spared each year by one person's vegan diet. Why should all meat eaters that enjoy meat suffer unnecessarily? Not eating meat is not suffering. Just like not eating candy or chocolate is not suffering. Actually, that's really incorrect. But we'll see how they address it. At least because the morality argument's more subjective. I can't agree. Like, I can tell you, as a meat eater myself, I would definitely suffer if I did not eat meat. Because you can just replace it with other foods. Secondly, I am not forcing anyone to go vegan or vegetarian. I'm arguing that people should go vegan or vegetarian because it's better for a healthy environment and the reduction of animal suffering. Well, if everybody should go vegan, then that means that they are going to suffer. So you're saying that they should suffer, so that's not an argument. I actually hit my mic, my bad. Chefs that specialize in meat and fish meals, just like chefs specialize in foods, people don't generally eat anymore. They can adapt their cooking skills. Fair point. Restaurant, cafes, etc. that are known for such meals, extend rebuttal. Yep. The entirety of the majority that convert to sucrose will, which will prefer meat and suffer needlessly. Once again, eating different meals that are better for your health, cheaper, better for the environment, just as good quality, if not better. Quality is not suffering. Now, again, that's probably coming from somebody who eats a lot of vegetables. With me, that eats a lot of meat, I will say definitely that I will suffer greatly. I remember just a personal anecdote. I remember back when I used to do Lent, right? And at Sunday I couldn't eat meat, and I would literally just be eating beans because that's all I found palatable, and lettuce because it just had no taste, and carrots that weren't cooked, like same, and I'll wait till 12 a.m. to just have something with meat. So if that's not suffering, because I'm not having good alternatives to meat products, which again you drop the points about the alternatives, then I'm definitely going to be suffering. Which again, bad rebuttal. I've shown that nearly every way veganism is the best course of action for humanity, even if Khan counters have been turned against him into the arguments from my side. With Khan hardly engaging with my evidence, his decision is clear. Grammar error. Okay, so now we know that if Khan does not make another grammar error, he wins spelling and grammar. The definition of suffering is something that Pro has left us completely without in this debate. For that reason, I'm forced to offer it in the last round, as I know voters allow last round new points to hold ground and need to rebuke something. Rather than define it with ing, I will define it suffer. To submit or to be forced to endure. To feel keenly. Labor under, suffer, thirst. To put up with especially as inevitable or unavoidable. The reason this is extremely important and justifiable for me to raise in the last round is that so much of Pro's hand waving away at my critical points, at my crucial points, stems from a misunderstanding of how simple and universally applicable the concept of suffering is across the board. It is indeed suffering to remove all meat and fish, whether nutritionally, tastefully, financially, if one's income is based on it, and in an irrefutable sense in terms of the options one has to eat and cook or even buy and sell. Let me reread that. The options one has to eat and cook or even buy and sell. The reason is that to suffer does not inherently mean whatever Pro may decide is agonizing enough to qualify. Is that spelled correctly? Yes, it is. This means that the entire contention of Pro that we are endling grammar error. Now, at the very least, grammar is neutral. That we are ending needless suffering by majority turning to vegetarian and vegan starts to totally turn on its head as we are pushing forward on it. Pro furthermore fails to see that my point is even having standalone worth, in that there will be complication and harms that will come with everyone converting, including the mass slaughter of animals overnight, since they aren't profitable to keep around anymore for a lot of farmers and slaughterhouses. Well, you contradicted your own argument, because you said if 50.01% of farmers, of people turn vegetarian, there'll still be a meat trade. So it's not going to be completely unprofitable. They would probably just breed less, right? And that's their rebuttal. So you fall flat on that. So let me go to the morality argumental. So I would say that Khan has safely won the morality argumental. He's also safely won the waste and population argumental. Okay. The beauty of my... Okay, Pro... Okay, fails, including the mass slaughter of animals overnight that aren't profitable. The beauty of my rebuttal, which I do hope voters see, is that I'm not denying that animals suffer in factory farming. I'm saying that our aims could well include... Wait, let me quote it. All we have to do is refine the techniques and where we fish, farm, and how we use the land and treat the creatures, and we'd be able to put all science to actually useful work. That's very true. Fair enough. All right, we save the environment, but how? Do you say anywhere in Pro's entire thesis that we ain't sure that? Okay, yeah. In fact, we should argue that every shred of scientific... Okay, it's a waste. Okay. I say all this in round one, expanding on it in round two. Pro's retort seems to make no sense to me. First of all, a vegan or vegetarian, as we explore more depth in round two, and are two different types of absolutists, with vegans having more severe drawbacks or benefits, which would only be apparent if Pro would have focused on them, and if they exist. I note that both are absolutists, which is something Pro has missed the entire debate. I could have trolled Pro by saying everyone should eat one piece of meat and fish a week, and only a minority should be fully vegetarian, let alone vegan, which actually would cut down more meat and fish consumption than Pro's plan, since Pro allows 49.9999% to be consuming animal products. Well, I guess meat, since the or does favor Pro if we apply it truly correctly. But that's my point. If 49.9999% ate a lot of meat and fish, it kind of is sillier than everyone cutting down a substantial but not absolute amount. Pro's continual wavering around quantifying things is only one exception: environmental costs of farming and the meat and fish trade. The problem with this is that Pro never explains how, in the plan they have in mind, people use the resources in a more environmentally friendly way. Note that I even juxtapose this against the fact that the entire science study and trade looking into meat and fish alternatives and artificial this and that to make us enjoy without needing to harm animals or use as much land space for farming, etc., is, in my opinion, quite a waste of resources in early 2023 era, where we are in the early 2023 era. Okay, so Pro wins spelling and grammar. In the early 2022 era, we are in. So much else can be done, such as making artificial human organs to transplant with the same type, but not the same studies within science that lead to artificial meat. So much of Pro's case lacked any guarantees in place that anything would be better under the utopian regime, only criticisms of how things currently are. I agree with Pro that we should look to farm in a less factory/battery farm intensive way, but that's about where the agreement stops entirely. Pro would have us overnight turn vegetarian and vegan, that the only time frame fair and applicable to a resolution, and so many complications come with that, which Pro has literally overlooked and metaphorically brushed off the dust and swept under a rug. Okay, let's look at the argument. Environmental argument stable. Pandemic argument he did not address, he loses that. The morality argument he does not address. The economic argument, did he address that argument? No, he did not. So we have that, we have the pandemic argument, we have the morality argument, we have the economic argument, we have the health argument, we have the waste population argument. So what does this end up leaving? So if we count the tallies, these cancel out, so that means that this will go. This is a win for Pro, so this gives him 3 points. This is a win for Con, so this gives him 3 points. This is a win for Pro, so this gives him 3 points. This is a win for Pro, this gives him 1 point. This is a win for Con, this gives him 1 point. This is a win for Con, that gives him 1 point. This is a win. This is a conduct win for Con. This is a spelling and grammar win for Pro, if I remember correctly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tallies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tallies. So that's a win for Pro. So I'll just put win. Win. So if we count up all the tallies, let's go ahead and have it under here. Let's divide it like this. So 3 plus 3 equals 6, plus 1 equals 7. So Pro has 7 total points. And there's a 3 plus 1 plus 1. That means he has 5 points. So this means that... This means that Pro wins arguments, Con wins conduct, Pro wins spelling and grammar, considering that both used sources, but one contradicted the sources. I will put sources, which I don't have here, because keeping track of number would be bad. Sources to Con. That is my final verdict. Hopefully you enjoyed, and that's that. If you want me to judge any other debates, let me know, and I will judge it ASAP.